What are your impressions from the current Valdai session? As for the impressions, they're positive as always. I really like this platform, and the audience is always attentive, unbiased, and people are always trying to clarify various aspects regarding the Russian foreign policy, so I believe it's a very positive thing. And we are not just answering the questions of the participants, but we also learn something, take certain ideas that sometimes we put into practical dimension. And the day after tomorrow, there is going to be a session that the President Vladimir Putin is going to attend, so it is going to be the most interesting session, and we are looking forward to this Q&A session with the President. What is Moscow's position regarding his proposal to resolve the situation in Gaza, regarding the administration with the international participation? And did Moscow receive any signals about participating, being part of this contingent? And what are the chances for this plan to be successful? We have not seen this plan. We only heard comments about its contents. You have just listed its main points. From what I've heard, this international body that is going to temporarily govern Gaza is ostensibly going to be headed by Tony Blair, and I believe he has already declared this, but I don't know details, so I don't know what authority he's going to have and what is the stance of the Arab states. Some of them have already welcomed this program, this Donald Trump's program, but the final decision can only be made when we learn of the opinions of all the neighboring countries, of all the neighbors of Palestine and Israel and all the regional countries, League of Arab States, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and the Palestinians, first of all. Their opinion, from what I've heard, they don't want to put a representative of the Palestinian National Administration into this body. As for the security forces, no one has invited us to be part of this contingent, and we learned of this plan just yesterday. But from what I read, the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, while commenting the Trump's plan that was announced after Netanyahu's visit to Washington, so the Prime Minister of Israel said that it's a good plan. It must not be adjusted or changed. Hamas must agree with this, and the rest must agree with this. And the positive part of this plan is that Israel is going to preserve control over the security in Gaza, so it does not really correlate with the international contingent to take care of that. So first we need to learn all the details.
Спасибо. Корреспондент Синхуа, уважаемый Сергей Викторович, как вы знаете,
Minister Lavrov, as you know, China recently at the SCO summit suggested an initiative of global governance. Russia supported this initiative, so could you please say, what do you think, what practical significance of this initiative could be? And did you discuss some initiatives of this global governance at the SCO and BRICS platforms? As you said, the initiative was suggested just day before the SCO summit. We believe it's a useful initiative that is aimed at fixing the situation when the global governance mechanisms are subdued by the West completely. And, for example, in the International Monetary Fund, the U.S. is hindering the rulings on enhancing the quota for the Global South countries, and in the World Bank, where the West is abusing its authority there. Recently, Ursula von der Leyen said that we are going to support Palestine, that the Palestine must be restored, and we, the European Union, are going to earmark 1.5 billion euro to restore Palestine. So she said that proudly about this huge amount, but how much do they allocate for Ukraine? Not to restore Ukraine, but to keep it fighting against Russia. Hundreds times more. And recently, Ukraine approached the World Bank to ask for a loan. I believe it was $38 billion. And the World Bank said, why 38? We will give you 65. So that's abusing multilateral mechanisms to advance their unilateral, egotistical, selfish geopolitical goals. So it's a tragedy, and the World Trade Organization also requires some reforms, because for decades now the United States has been blocking the dispute settlement body, and it is hindering its work to stop this body from looking into requests from China on the discrimination and the violations by the Western countries in their trade with the People's Republic of China. And the United Nations, of course, the reform of the UN Security Council and of the other bodies. So it must be done in a fair manner, including the reform of the UN Secretariat, where the key positions that the operation of the entire system depends upon, and the allocation of financial resources within the organization depends upon. So all these offices, all these positions are seized or privatized by the representatives of NATO countries or EU countries. So we will stand for the reformation of the global governance as for the practical aspects of this. And we proceed from the assumption that our Chinese colleagues, as the ones who came up with this initiative, they will put it into concrete, practical terms, and we will help with this. TASS agency, Moldova held parliamentary elections recently. The governing party won. Can we say that in Moldova they are trying to strengthen the so-called anti-Russian platform? Yes, Maya Sandu is one of the leaders of anti-Russian rhetoric. So the elections were fraud. So for me, I'm amazed to what degree you can manipulate the elections. But even with this manipulation, even with trying to stop the Transnistria citizens to participate in the elections, they were shutting down bridges, they were declaring some quarantine. But even with all these manipulations, the opposition won more votes within Moldova than the Maya Sandu's party. And only when they tapped into the foreign voting resource, when basically everyone was dragged into the polling stations in Europe, whereas in Moscow they had only 2 polling stations. So they received the votes that they needed, this 0.5%, and with all these machinations, with all those manipulations, it's a very demonstrative that even when they employ such methods, they do not really succeed. Daria Kozlova, Russia 24, there are a lot of... It says RT on your... We all have RT on our mics currently. So a lot of loud statements we hear from Washington. Special envoy of Trump's, Keith Kellogg, told Fox News that Ukraine allegedly has the permission to strike deep into Russia, and Vance J is saying about possible Tomahawk supplies. So does Moscow consider it as pressure exerted by Washington on Moscow? And from diplomatic standpoint, how the Moscow authorities are going to react? I believe that first of all, it's Europe exerting pressure on Washington, and Washington wants to show that they take into account the opinion of their allies. I don't think that the decision has been made already. Well, Americans do not supply Tomahawks to everyone who asks. I believe only Spain and the Netherlands have Tomahawks in Europe, so they don't supply to anyone else. And if they believe that Ukraine is a responsible country that can responsibly employ such weapons, it would be a surprising fact for me. Yes, Keith Kellogg and J.D. Vance spoke about this, and J.D. Vance, in principle, he has a pro-Ukrainian stance, even though President Trump is always saying that he's a mediator, that Russia and Ukraine must resolve their differences with each other. But Keith Kellogg recently recommended the Ukrainian regime to accept the reality, to accept de facto that they have what territory they have. And he told them not to worry about this. For example, because the Baltic countries were part of the Soviet Union, we did not recognize them, and then the Baltic countries were free. The same will happen to you, said Keith Kellogg. It's different from the stance taken by President Trump. So there are a lot of voices, there are a lot of speakers who are advancing the Ukrainian agenda. But the Kremlin has already said it clearly that even if Tomahawks are supplied to Ukraine, it will not change the military situation. Minister Lavrov, good afternoon. A question about India, our main partner in the global south. The U.S. administration tries to stop India from buying Russian oil because it is funding the conflict in Ukraine. What is the actual reason for this pressure? The real reason is that President Trump said that the United States need to defend their national interests, and that includes such an aggressive advancement of their commodities to their international partners, and they need to get rid of the competition, in this case of the Russian Federation, under the pretext that there is war raging in Ukraine. But our Indian counterparts have already reacted to these urges to stop buying oil from Russia, because they proceed from the assumption if the United States want to sell something to India, including oil, India is ready to negotiate and to talk over the conditions, the terms. But as for the trade with the other countries, it is only for Russia and India to discuss. Prime Minister Modi spoke of this, and Foreign Minister Jaishankar also said that. And I believe that this stance reflects national interest and national pride and honor of our Indian friends. Thank you. Sergey Monin, Brazil de facto agency. Brazil played an active role trying to mediate the talks on the Ukrainian conflict. So what do you think about the current context with the Brazilian side and this context in the context of developing multipolar world? We have very close contacts with our Brazilian friends. At the BRICS summit and at the foreign ministers meeting, we had very detailed conversations with the President Lula and with the Foreign Minister Mauro Vieira. We appreciate the Brazilian stance that a couple of years ago they came up with this proposal to facilitate the resolution of humanitarian issues, among other things, and so the humanitarian issues are being resolved in accordance with those views that were offered by Brazil, and Africans in South Africa also came up with the similar initiatives, and humanitarian matters are being resolved, and there are prisoner swaps, and bodies of the fallen soldiers are being swapped, and we try to resolve the issue of the families getting reunited. The Ukrainian side claims that thousands of children were relocated. And when our delegations met in Istanbul, our delegation insisted on receiving a list of these children because it's a very grave matter. And after lengthy negotiations, the Ukrainian gave the list of 339 children on this list. Out of them, the majority were not children, were adults, and they had nothing to do with being relocated to the Russian Federation. A vast part of these children were not in Russia but in Europe. So these humanitarian matters must be resolved in an honest manner, and we appreciated that Brazil stands for this as well. As for the political aspects of the settlement, we explained it to our Brazilian counterparts and to our other BRICS counterparts. We told them about our approaches that Vladimir Putin spoke at length about. For a sustainable resolution, we need to remove the root causes of the conflict, the threat to the Russian Federation that the West was creating using the Ukrainian regime, and the rights of the Russians and of the Russian speakers in Ukraine must be restored completely, because currently these rights are banned.